Welcome to Drinks in the Library, the only library where drinks aren't just allowed, they are required. I'm your librarian host, Gigi Howard, and each episode I'll be interviewing a guest about a much-loved book that we will be pairing with a drink for you to enjoy along with us or consider for your next book club meetup. As always, stay curious and support your local library. Hello, Libration Nation. This week we are discussing The Last Book in the Universe by Rodman Philbrick. I'm talking with Heather Knapp. She was born in New Jersey, raised in Virginia. She didn't grow up with an immediate love of books, however. She'd always loved everything fantasy or mythology related, but she didn't really develop a love of reading until she was about 15 and the Percy Jackson series opened the floodgates for her. And she really hasn't stopped reading since. She now spends her time working in a library and escaping realities with video games, books, and writing. Her favorite genres are dystopia and fantasy with a romance thrown in. The angstier the better. And lastly, and most importantly, she's a collector of all things geeky and proudly boasts to knowing every line of the extended versions of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So, in our cocktail for this week, we actually did a mocktail of a chocolate martini. Is it a milkshake? Is it chocolate milk? I don't know, but it was delicious. And I hope you enjoy this pod. Thanks. All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Okay. 27. I've worked in the library system as a library assistant for the past 4 years. Before that, I was at Barnes & Noble's, and then I was an English major, so
Okay.
a lot of, I absolutely love books. It was definitely like a refuge for me, growing up in a very stressful world. Mm-hmm. I also love playing video games, and okay. I am also have been a writer since I was like 16, 17. Mostly just like fantasy dystopia stuff. Mm-hmm. That's just kind of like a big, I guess like outlet for me. And yeah, I have 2 cats, Binks and Huxley.
Love it.
Huxley's named after the author of my favorite book, Brave New World, mm-hmm. Aldous Huxley. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not very active. I'm very an indoorsy person, but I love nature. I love animals. I guess my passions kind of lead me to like where I would really like to work with books, but I also really love mental health. So it's kind of like I kind of switch between those two mm-hmm. kind of jobs. Okay. So, yeah, I'm, like, in training to be a peer recovery specialist, which is, like, in the mental health field. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So, you're doing a little bit of both.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's say, so what book did you choose for us today?
So, my book is called The Last Book in the Universe by Rodman Philbrick. And it's a like children's, well, like juvenile post-apocalyptic mm-hmm. Sci-fi, and it's pretty much just about like how there was like this thing what they call the Big Shake. It was like this huge earthquake that kind of like shattered the world. Things like their like water systems ran out, and like there was all this radiation and pollution, so they're like air's not that great, and it's kind of like their whole society collapsed. This everybody lives in this place called the Herb, and then there's also this place called Eden, and it's basically where Eden is this super beautiful like functioning ecosystem place in the middle of the Herb. It's like surrounded by the Herb. And that's where these people called the Proofs live, and they're, like, genetically modified people. They kind of, like, stay in their own little bubble while the world is, like, rotting around them. And everyone in the Herb, they're known as normals, And it's kind of like if you see a proof out in the herb, it's basically like a sin just to look at them because they're just so beautiful. And they say, like, your eyes are too dirty to look at them, like, stuff like that. And so do you want me to talk about the main characters, or should
we can get to that. I did
after
want
the drink?
the drink. So, do you want? I can tell us about it, or you can tell what we picked.
Is it just chocolate milk?
So it
not just because I love chocolate milk.
No, yeah. So it's a little. I tried to like look up how to make it fancy. It's milk. It's chocolate syrup, and I put condensed milk in there too because it makes it like a little thicker and sweeter too. And then we put whipped cream on top.
Yes.
So yeah, it's I would say it's a chocolate mocktail, and we'll both sip together.
There's no way to down dress chocolate milk. You know? Like it's good no matter what.
So. It is. And I was making it, and I was like trying to figure out how much chocolate to put in. I was like, I just put a lot in. I think it always makes it better.
More is better.
Yeah. We picked chocolate milk. It does relate to the book.
Yeah. So there's one of the main characters is a orphan boy who is like around 5, and he can't really speak that well. And the main character, the very first time they meet, he gives him a chocolate bar, which in their world they call chalks bars. And so then he starts saying the word chalks, and that's like the only word that he'll say through most of the book. And like chocolate makes people happy, I think.
It does.
And so yeah, it's just like kind of like that word that he hangs on to. I think to me he's like such an innocent like character in it, that like chocolate is like such a like innocent boy, innocent food, like coming together in like such this like dark world. So
yeah. So anyway, it was a cool tie-in, and it made perfect sense. So chocolate mocktails, very tasty. And so going back to the book, who were you when you first read this story?
So I was a moody preteen. I read this when I was in 6th grade. I didn't like reading until I was around 15.
Okay.
So at the time, my English teacher had like his own little personal library in his classroom, and everyone had to read for like 15-20 minutes. And he told me, like, you have to pick a book from my thing. Like, he was like, I don't care what it is, but you have to pick something and read it. And so I, like, begrudgingly, like, picked this one because the cover is so creepy. This is the cover, and it's just, like, this creepy, like...
It's very creepy.
Like, creepy paper boy with, like, no eyes and, like, in this very, like, dark, like, barren world.
Yeah.
And that caught my attention when I was 12.
I bet. So. Yeah, it like, you would think it was a horror novel, honestly, the way it looked.
At the time, I liked, like, Goosebumps, like, all those things interested me, so I was like, ooh, creepy cover. I basically picked that one up, and I wasn't really expecting much, but I ended up really liking it, and I think that I related a lot with the main character because he's just, like, an outcast in this world of outcasts.
Yeah. And
I really related with that when I was younger. I was like very much like a wallflower, like not really good at making friends or anything. So yeah, I ended up really liking it. And then I think I've read it, like I read it again when I was in my early 20s maybe, and then I read it just like before this to kind of like refresh my memory, and I feel like it spoke to me in different levels, like based like on where I am and at each phase of my life.
Yeah. So. This is a podcast about books, and I mean it's called The Last Book in the Universe, and that comes back into it, but just like the importance of that story, and I'll let you tell it probably way better than I could tell it, but
I'll try.
Yeah. What, like, if we're talking about like tone or vibe of the story?
Mostly like the overall thing is just sad to me. There's a lot of just, like, they're, like, just living in this broken world where there's not, like, nobody's educated. Most people don't even know how to read. Main character is kind of just, like, he doesn't like himself because he's been told for so long that he's just, like, this defective person. And so, yeah, I would definitely say, like, overall sad. There's also, like, some just kind of creepy parts. Because there's, like, some places there's, like, the herb is split up into different sections called latches, and some of them, like, the people have kind of gone savage because they have gone so long without, like, someone leading them or, like, having something to cling their humanity onto. So, yeah, and then, like, I think, like, near the end, though, it's, like, a vibe of, like, hopefulness of, like, things eventually getting better.
Right, yeah. And the main character, they call him Spaz.
Yeah, they call him Spaz because he has epilepsy, so he's had seizures since he was a kid. And because they're not educated, they don't really know about diseases or any of that, so they don't understand that, like, what he has. So they see, like, his condition as, like he could hurt people, it could be contagious. He's just a freak, and so people call him Spaz or the Spaz Boy. And in the beginning, he says, like, my name is Spaz, and, like, I'm fine with it. But then as you go along in the book, you realize that he's really not fine with it. He talks about how, like, all he can hear in his head is the word spaz and how much he hates it and stuff. The other big character, whose name is Ryder, is this old man who's, like, very educated. He knows how to read and write, and he knows what Spaz has, and so he doesn't see him as having this, like this leper. He tries to actually, like, build him up by saying, like, a lot of really famous people who accomplish great things had epilepsy, and he's just like, I just don't want to hear it. Like, he's just been, like, there's all this negative talk, and it's, like, hard to drown out that negative talk with, like, positive talk.
Yeah, I remember he talks about Charles Dickens.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of people that he mentions that I was like, did all these people really have epilepsy? And I meant to, like, look it up if they actually did, or if he was just telling him that to make him feel better about himself. But he might have.
But I can't remember anybody else that they talked about in the book. But
I think the only one that I remember, he mentioned, like, a lot of writers. I remember he said Joan of Arc, which I'm wondering if he meant, like, I love, like, learning about Joan of Arc. I've read a lot of books about her. But I'm wondering if he meant that, like, people would say, like, her episodes of supposedly hearing, like, voices of, like, angels and stuff, like, maybe he meant that was supposed to be seizures. I'm not really sure. Okay. But, yeah, that was the only one that I remember.
Yeah, so we have Ryder and Spaz, and then, so it's sort of like a quest.
Yeah, so the whole point of the book starting out is that Spaz used to have, had, like, a foster family, and his little sister was, like, his whole world and his favorite person. Her name's Bean. He talks about how she was, like, the only person he'd ever loved, and then because of his epilepsy, his foster father, like, they send him away because his foster father thinks that he could hurt Bean. And so he's sent away to live in another, like, a latch that's on, like, the other side of the herb, with a latch boss named Billy Bismo. And very, very interesting names in this book. And so he basically, the whole point of the book is that he gets a message that Bean is sick and is dying, and she wants to see him before she dies. So he ends up leaving with Ryder, who has traveled the Latches before, and it's illegal to travel the Latches, so it's very dangerous. And Ryder basically says, like, I know a way to get through, and I want one more, one last adventure. Ryder is writing a book, which, nobody, Spaz says, like, nobody reads books anymore. Books basically don't even exist, so why are you writing this thing? And Ryder says, like, well, somebody at some future date might read it, and that gives him hope to write this book. So he's like, I need to finish my book, and I can see this as, like, being my ending. So yeah, it goes where they're traveling through the Latches, and each one has, like, its own danger in it, whether it's like these like crazy, I guess, like feral humans called the Monkey Boys. And they see in the book there are these things which is like kind of melting people's brains called mind probes, that is like a needle that you stick in your head, and then it projects things into your mind, so it makes you feel like you're there. And so there's ones that are like ones that make you feel like you're in Eden, where life is perfect. Ones where it's like, they call them shooters, where it's like dangerous, like adrenaline rush type ones. So people have been using those to distract themselves from like this terrible world around them. And it's also like distracting them from actually like being human, and like taking care of each other.
I thought that part was really interesting because it felt like a parallel to what we're seeing today with like VR and virtual and like the metaverse. Yeah. And I don't know if it's really caught on. And I mean, when they first started talking about it, we're going to have a metaverse and it's going to be great, and you'll go like and hang out with your friends. I was horrified.
It's very like Ready Player One.
Yes.
Where
100%.
It's like basically their whole, like, their schooling is through this virtual thing, their work is through this virtual thing, and everyone else just forgets about the world around them. Yeah. That's like kind of definitely how, and like this book came out in like the early 2000s when VR wasn't even a thing. Right. So it's definitely crazy how to see like how things have progressed to that point.
So you read this in 6th grade. Do you read, so this is juvenile fiction. Do you still read a lot of juvenile fiction? I mean,
I don't. I feel like I kind of have like grown up with reading to where it's hard for me to like relate once I get like the Percy Jackson series was the books that got me to start loving reading. Yeah. Like this one influenced me a lot, but that one like led me to like want to keep going. And when I try to go back and read that now, I just feel like I'm this adult overlooking these children. And, like it just feels weird to me. And like sometimes it even feels like I love YA fantasy, but sometimes some YAs like I feel too old for. So yeah, I do try. I usually mostly read like adult fantasy, adult sci-fi, or dystopia. There's just like some things like this one, maybe because I feel like for a juvenile book, it's very heavy.
It is, yeah.
So I didn't feel like and Spaz, for his age, he's like 14, 15, he has to be mature because he's in this crazy world where he has to fend for himself. So I didn't get that feeling of like not being able to relate. Right. But yeah, other than that, mostly I stick to like, I guess, my own age.
Yeah. Oh, and I do want to say, and I think you know this because you're a library person, but just like for the listeners, like I wouldn't ask that because like I would assume you read juvenile fiction. It's like there are some people, adults, and that's what they like.
Yes, and I know a lot of people who do read like a lot of juvenile fiction. I love like kids' picture books. I think that they're the most hilarious thing. And when I took a critical theory class in college that was like very a lot, very, like, intellectually based, but she taught each theory through a children's picture book, showing that, like, these complex things can be found in the simplest of places. And I think that's where, like, I started really liking picture books. And then working in a library kind of just reinforced that. But as far as, like, the chapter books and everything, yeah, I pretty much tried to stay away from them.
And moved on.
I think it's just, like, very character-based. For me, like, I still watch a lot, as you can see by my Bluey book bag. I very much love kids shows because they remind me of, like, a simpler time when I was a kid, and they're very much like stress relievers for me.
Yeah.
For books, I'm wondering if it's like I grew up where, like, a single mom that worked late every night. I didn't really have people, like, reading books to me. And so that's, like, chapter books. Like, once you're, like, in that phase as a kid where you're moving from, like, books with pictures to, like, books with all words, it's very daunting.
Right.
And so I wonder if, like, maybe I'm just, like, we're gonna stay away from that, because it reminds me of, like, this time where I'm like, I don't want to read, because for so long I wasn't able to, like, imagine things in my head happening. I had to have those pictures as, like, a basis of something to go on. And so, yeah, I went to, like, from, like, reading graphic novels to then finally, like, actually reading, like, chapter books and stuff. So, yeah, I did not have, like, a very traditional upbringing, just because I didn't have, like, adults around me. Not saying that it's my mom's fault, like, absolutely love my mom, but she had to provide for us. And so, yeah, I didn't have, like, somebody to inspire that love of reading, I guess, from a young age.
Well, cool. Well, and I love the Bluey backpack. Yes. Are you Bluey or Bingo person? Do you have
I'm definitely Bluey.
Okay.
I think that Bingo is a little crazy for me. I was a very quiet, like, mature kid who loved spending time by myself.
Okay.
I love them both, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, like, such a good show. I think there's, like, something in it for kids and adults.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love how realistic the characters are. I feel like they just it's like they watch actual families interacting and then make episodes based off of it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. I would it's definitely, like, one of the better children's shows, you know.
Definitely.
So, absolutely. Well, cool. Let's see, what else we have? So, what do we know? Do you know anything about the author? Do we know? Have you read more of his stuff?
I honestly have I've not read anything else by him. I know that he wrote, like, the Freak the Mighty, which is, like, supposed to be a popular juvenile book, but I did not read that one. I was actually, like, looking up stuff about him in preparation for this question, because I was like, I don't know anything.
Well, that's okay.
I learned that, like, he, like, he was a longshoreman, and I just love that term, a longshoreman. And he would, like, write stuff while he worked on, like the docks and everything before he became, like, a writer. Okay. So other than that, like, I'm not one of those people that really is that invested in an author's life. I'm like, I love what you've created, and I don't really care about your personal life. Yeah, like, for me, I think, like, I see them, there's, like, this disconnect between authors and their writing to me, to where it's like I don't feel the need to know who you are as a person. Maybe because it could spoil what they've written for me. I don't kind of like a don't meet your heroes type of thing. So
you're not, I mean, I've asked this question a few times, and you're not the first person to say that. So, I mean, there's a lot of truth there. So, anyway. Is there anything that we've missed about this story that you want to add in, or?
I guess, like, even though, like, this book, I read it at, like, a time when I was very, like, not having that great of a time in, like, middle school and everything. It was definitely like I said, like, I related very much to the main character, but I also really loved, like, Bean's character she's very positive. She sees the world in, like, a different light, and there's, like, a, quote from the book where she finds, like, a broken plate out, like, in the middle of, I guess, like, rubble or something, and it's blue, and blue's not a very common color for them. Like, they don't have, because of all the pollution, they think that the sky is gray until they actually like, find out that it's blue in real life. And so, like, she says, like, wouldn't it be wonderful if everything was this color? Like, if everything was blue, you'd have to love it. And I feel like that has always been, like, one of the reasons that, like, blue is my favorite color, because I just think, like, any shade of blue is, like, beautiful. And I've always thought, like, if everything's blue, then then I would love it. Like, I never realized that might have originated from this book until, like, I read that line again, and I was like, oh, wow, like, I never realized that was something that I read forever ago could have affected, like, my thinking all these years later.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's just, like, cool, like, how the littlest things in this book affected me, and I feel like it's probably because I read it at such a time when you're, like, still, like, developing and, like, trying to find who you are and stuff.
And good for your teacher at that time for connecting with you.
Yeah, I don't even remember if I, like, if he asked me anything about it, or if he, like, if like, he stayed up with, like, what I was reading or anything, but he still made that, like, connection of, like, you have to read something. And I'm, like, glad that I had that push to force me to read something like that. So, and it's definitely something that I recommend to people now. Because I feel like this is the type of book where no matter how old it gets, it's still relevant. And it still could, like, touch people. Yeah. Like, even when I read this past time, like, the ending made me cry. Like, So, but, yeah. I mean, I feel like the ending is, like, it's sad, but hopeful.
It is.
End, so.
Yeah. Well, he, like, starts the story off so alone and also othered by his condition. Like you said, he's isolated in a world of isolation. And, you know, by the end, he's sort of made friends and found hope and moved forward. Yeah. So there's that. So, and you were kind of getting to it. So, I mean, who would you recommend this story to?
I mean, honestly, like, I think that maybe kids who don't like to read, I know, like, so many kids around, like, middle school and stuff who just, like, don't. I think at that age, it's kind of like you either love reading or you hate it and think it's, like, dumb or something. And so for me, I think it's very much like a book that would get kids' attention. I think when it comes to kids who don't like to read, it's, like, usually stuff where it's, like, scary stuff, post-apocalyptic stuff really gets their attention for whatever reason. And to me, I'm like, as long as they're reading. Like, right. And just, I guess, like, people who like sci-fi, post-apocalyptic stuff. Yeah. One thing that, there's, like, an interview in the back of the book where, of, like, the author, and he talks about, like, the weird words that he uses in the book. They're not, like, words that are in our vocabulary. And they're talking about, like, what inspired that. And he talks about the book, or the Clockwork Orange, which I don't know if you've read that, but...
I actually haven't read it.
It is a weird, heavy... It's not for everyone. I really liked it, but... I know so many people who are like, this book is, like, a disgrace. And, like, but he made up, like, almost his own language, like, the author of that book. To where, like, I think it was like a mix of like Russian and English or something. But it's like as you're reading it, your mind adapts to the words to where it's basically like you're reading another language and your mind knows, and it's just from like you getting used to it. And so he did that with like the weird words that he uses it, like borked instead of like pissed off and everything. So I guess like for people who like that kind of book, it would be good. I don't know. I recommend it to anyone, honestly.
Yeah, and like you said, it did remind me a lot of like Ready Player One. It had similar kind of vibes to that. So thank you. I enjoyed it. Anyway, thank you so much for being here and having some chocolate with me.
Yes, I
and
really
introducing me this book. So.
Yeah.
All right. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending some time with me and my guest for an episode of Drinks in the Library. For more information about the show, you can find us on Instagram at Drinks in the Library, on the World Wide Web, drinksinthelibrary.com, or shoot me an email at drinkspod@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.